The police found them all seated neatly around the dinner table. Father, mother, son, and daughter, smiling. Plates of untouched food sat in front of them. No sign of struggle. No sign of trauma. No sign of death. But they were gone. Dead. And no one could explain how, or why. Officer Dana Mercer had seen plenty of disturbing crime scenes in her 10 years on the Charleston police force, but nothing had ever made her stomach clench quite like this. The call had come in as a welfare check. A neighbor complained of a foul smell and said the Elmridge family hadn't been seen in days. Standard procedure. Dana expected to find perhaps a carbon monoxide leak or an elderly family member passed away in their sleep. What she found instead would replay in her mind for the rest of her life. The front door was locked. No sign of forced entry. The lights inside were off, curtains drawn. Dana knocked repeatedly. No answer. The smell was faint but noticeable, something sweet and decaying. She circled the perimeter. All windows were locked from the inside. When the backup arrived, they forced entry through the back door. That's when everything went quiet. The family dining room was perfectly arranged, almost like a staged photo. The father, William Elmridge, sat at the head of the table in a crisp white shirt, his tie slightly loosened. His wife, Clara, wore a pale yellow dress, her makeup untouched, hands gently folded in her lap. Their teenage children, Michael and Elise, sat opposite each other, still wearing their school uniforms. They were all smiling. Not wildly but with soft, unsettling grins, as though someone had whispered a private joke. The food on their plates had not been touched. Chicken, mashed potatoes, peas. Steam no longer rose from the dishes, but they hadn't spoiled. Everything looked fresh. Time had stopped. Dana called in a crime scene unit. Photographs were taken from every angle. The bodies showed no signs of struggle or injury. No bruises, no cuts, no blood. Each family member sat upright as if simply paused mid-dinner. Their eyes were closed. Peaceful. Eerily so. The coroner arrived and pronounced them all dead on the scene. The estimated time of death? Roughly 5 days prior. That raised an immediate question. How had the bodies not begun to show more advanced decomposition? How were they so preserved? Things got stranger. The house was immaculate. No signs of ransacking, no evidence of robbery or forced entry. The security system hadn't been triggered. The alarm logs showed the system had been armed until 2 days after the estimated time of death, meaning either someone turned it off after they had already died, or it had reset itself, something the manufacturer insisted was impossible. Even the family dog, a Labrador named Daisy, was found alive and well in the upstairs bathroom. She had no signs of malnourishment, no dehydration. Someone, or something, had been feeding her. The initial theory leaned toward poisoning. Something in the food, maybe. But toxicology reports came back clean. No drugs, no chemicals, no pathogens. Carbon monoxide levels in the house were normal. There were no traces of nerve agents or hallucinogens. The autopsy findings were inconclusive. Heart rates had simply stopped. Every single one of them had a heart that ceased beating without trauma, clotting, or degeneration. Like switches flipped off. Dana reviewed every detail of the house with a fine-toothed comb. She noticed that the clocks throughout the home were all stopped at 7:06 p.m. Wall clocks, wristwatches, even the microwave. Power to the house had not been interrupted, which eliminated a surge or outage. The electric company confirmed consistent energy use in the days leading up to the discovery. One of the officers suggested electromagnetic interference. Another joked about aliens. No one laughed. When they dusted the house for prints, they found only the family's fingerprints. No outsiders, no intruders. They checked phone records, emails, messages. Nothing. No cries for help, no threats. The last outgoing message from Clara's phone was a photo of the dinner table, sent to her sister at exactly 6:58 p.m. with the caption, "Dinner's ready. Just another quiet night in." The sister said she thought nothing of it. She assumed it was just a routine update from a family that liked to stay close. But when investigators examined the metadata of the image, they found something curious. The GPS data embedded in the photo showed that it wasn't taken from within the house, but rather from 200 miles away. And yet the picture clearly showed the Elmridge's own kitchen. Dana's unease grew. She started dreaming about the scene. Nightmares. The smiling faces. Sometimes in the dream, one of them would open their eyes. Sometimes the dog would speak. Sometimes she was sitting at the table, her own plate untouched, her limbs frozen in place. She started avoiding mirrors. The smile haunted her. Back at the station, officers grew uneasy. The photos from the crime scene couldn't be pulled up on any computer. Files became corrupted. Even printed versions warped. Smiles seemed to widen or vanish entirely. One officer quit after seeing the father's eyes seemingly open in a still frame. Another took leave for a nervous breakdown. The story reached the news for a few days but faded quickly. No cause of death meant no headline. People moved on. But Dana didn't. She kept returning to the house, driving by at night, watching the lights flicker on and off inside, despite no electricity being supplied. Once, she swore she saw shadows moving past the windows. Another time the front door was open, swinging slightly, inviting. She never went back inside. And the Elmridges? Still seated at that table in her mind. Still smiling. Detective Marshall Crane took over the case after the autopsies returned inconclusive. A veteran with over 2 decades of experience and a reputation for logical thinking, he approached the Elmridge deaths like any other mystery, methodically, without emotion. But the more he dug, the more the facts refused to align. It didn't make sense. People didn't just die like that. Not all at once, not without warning, not without reason. And certainly not with smiles on their faces. He began with the basics. Toxicology had ruled out poisoning, narcotics, and airborne chemicals. The water supply was clean. Blood tests found nothing irregular. No infections, no diseases, no markers of pre-existing conditions. Every organ was perfectly intact. No signs of cardiac arrest. No indication of asphyxiation. It was as if the bodies had simply turned off. The pathologist who signed the report called it a spontaneous systemic failure of unknown origin, a term Crane had never encountered before and doubted he ever would again. Surveillance footage from nearby homes provided no leads. The camera on the Elmridge's front porch had stopped recording at exactly 7:06 p.m., the same time every clock in the house had frozen. When the tech team examined the system, they found the files corrupted beyond recovery. The memory card itself had melted slightly, even though the device showed no signs of overheating. That level of damage suggested intense heat or magnetic interference, neither of which had any place in the quiet suburban house. Crane turned to the family's background. William Elmridge was a mechanical engineer at a mid-level firm. No enemies, no debts, no controversial projects. Clara was a freelance illustrator, mostly drawing children's books. Her life, according to friends and colleagues, was quiet, almost boring. Their children were good students, socially active, no behavioral issues, no signs of abuse or trouble. The family had lived in that home for nearly 10 years. Stable. Normal. Too normal. Crane reviewed every interview from neighbors. Everyone described the Elmridges as polite but distant. They attended community events, waved from their porch but kept to themselves. A few neighbors mentioned something odd, lights flickering late at night, strange music drifting from the house, never loud but unsettling. One woman swore she once saw the same figure standing motionless at an upstairs window every night for a week. She assumed it was a mannequin for Halloween. It was March. A deeper dive into utility records revealed minor anomalies. Power surges isolated to the Elmridge residence. Unusual voltage drops at night, like something draining energy intermittently. The electric company dismissed them as equipment glitches. Crane wasn't so sure. He brought in a private forensic technician who installed spectrum analyzers to detect unusual frequencies in the house. The readings were inconsistent, but one pattern emerged. A low-frequency pulse, barely audible, that repeated at irregular intervals. It wasn't coming from the grid or any known device. Crane pulled every string he could. He had specialists from the FBI's behavioral unit look at the case. They found nothing to suggest a psychological cause. No group delusion, no mass hysteria, no ritual suicide. No suicide notes. No online searches about death. No purchases of dangerous substances. They had dinner and then they died. Together. Quietly. He interviewed Clara's sister again, trying to trace the photo Clara had sent at 6:58 p.m. When the file was analyzed again, the GPS coordinates still indicated a location over 200 miles away. That location was traced to an abandoned hunting cabin deep in the woods of Sumter National Forest. Crane drove there himself. The place had long been deserted. Dust-covered furniture. Collapsing walls. But inside he found something unexpected. A small photo of the Elmridge family pinned to the wall, yellowed and curling with the words, "They already knew," scrawled beneath it in faded ink. Who knew? Knew what? He took the photo in for testing. No fingerprints. No fibers. Just dust. It was almost as if it had been there for decades. Though the photo was identical to one taken just a year ago, based on matching clothing and decorations. That opened a door Crane wasn't prepared for. He returned to the Elmridge home one last time, alone. It was sealed off, abandoned, considered a cold case. Inside, everything was still in place. The food on the table, though spoiled now, had not been cleared. The scent was foul, metallic. Crane walked the halls slowly, studying family photos, drawings stuck to the fridge, forgotten toys in the living room. Life had once filled this space. Now it felt hollow, like a stage after the audience had left. He climbed to the attic. A storage space mostly filled with boxes and old holiday decorations. That's when he noticed a patch of dust disturbed on the floor, leading to a wall panel slightly ajar. Behind it, a crawlspace. Inside, he found a small, battered camcorder with a note attached. "Don't watch alone." The camera had no battery. He took it back to the lab, connected it to a power supply, and played the single recording it held. The footage was grainy, time-stamped just hours before the family's death. It showed the family gathered around the dinner table, smiling, just as they had been found. But their eyes were open. And in the background, near the darkened hallway behind them, something moved. A figure. Unclear. Unfocused. Not quite human. It didn't walk so much as flicker, like a glitch in reality. When the father looked directly into the lens, he whispered, "We're ready." The video ended with static. Crane rewound it a dozen times, showed it to analysts. Some saw the figure. Others didn't. A few claimed to hear whispering beneath the static. One technician claimed she saw her own face reflected in the figure's shape. After that, Crane closed the file. Not out of laziness or bureaucracy, but out of fear. The case had crossed the line between unexplained and unacceptable. He left the force 2 months later, moved across the country and changed his name. He never spoke of the Elmridge family again. Theories spread like wildfire once the public caught wind of the Elmridge case. Reddit threads, YouTube documentaries, podcasts, each tried to unravel the impossible death of a seemingly perfect family. Some believed it was a case of rare, undetectable poisoning. Others leaned on more esoteric explanations. Cultists, paranormal forces, secret government experiments. The lack of answers was fertile ground for the bizarre. But hidden beneath the noise was something far stranger, and far more unsettling, than any theory shared on the internet. It started with an anonymous envelope dropped off at the Charleston precinct 3 weeks after the Elmridge house was sealed. There was no return address. The writing was childlike, uneven. Inside was a single sentence, printed in red ink on white paper. "They didn't die. They were chosen." Along with the note was a still image, a frame from the recovered camcorder footage, but altered. The background was darker, and the shadowy figure that flickered in the original video was now in perfect focus. It had no eyes, just hollows. Its body was too long, too slender, like something human that had been stretched. There was a face, almost, but it looked like melted wax, emotionless and hovering just behind Elise, the daughter, in the still. Forensics confirmed the image hadn't been tampered with digitally. It had been printed from an analog camera. No one could explain how the shadow had become fully visible. Worse yet, when Detective Crane, who had long since stepped away from the case, was shown the image, he refused to speak. He stared at it, turned pale, and quietly walked out of the building. That night, he checked into a motel 40 miles outside the city and never returned. Soon after, a second letter arrived. This one more disturbing. It included details about the family that had never been made public, like the brand of cereal Clara bought every Saturday, or the fact that Michael, the son, had once broken his wrist at age 6, though no records of that injury existed. They had been marked long before the dinner, the letter read. "Some houses are not built on land. They are built on thresholds." That line struck a chord with one of the new investigators, Agent Faye Holloway, who had been assigned to comb through lingering cold cases in the area. She began looking into the property history. What she uncovered was more than unsettling, it was a pattern. Over the last 130 years, 5 homes had been built on that exact plot. Each time a family lived there. Each time tragedy struck. In 1892, the Archer family burned to death in their sleep. In 1927, the Porters vanished without a trace, breakfast still on the table. In 1953, the Harrows were found in the bathtub, fully clothed, water still running, no cause of death. Each time the structure was demolished and rebuilt. Each time, the records quietly vanished from local archives until Holloway dug them back up, piece by piece. She also found a common thread. Each family had left behind one surviving item. A photograph with a blurred figure lurking somewhere in the background. Different poses, different rooms, but the same shape. Long hollow. Watching. Her research led her to a local man named Eli Brogan, now in his 80s, who had worked as a construction foreman in the 1970s during one of the property's rebuilds. When she visited him, he was cautious, reserved. But when she mentioned the address, his demeanor changed. "We weren't supposed to dig that deep," he said quietly. "There was a chamber underneath. Stonework that didn't match anything around here. Looked Roman almost. Not natural. Cold as ice even in summer." The men who saw it changed. One quit the next day. Said he kept hearing whispers from the dirt. "We sealed it with concrete. Poured it like a tomb. But I always knew it would open again." Agent Holloway recorded the interview, but the audio was corrupted when she played it back. White noise, and beneath it, a barely audible voice repeating one phrase, "Don't invite it." She returned to the Elmridge house, against protocol. It was night. Rain tapped at the windows. The dining table had been cleared by cleanup crews, but the imprint of the chairs remained on the floor. She descended into the basement. The air grew colder with every step. In the far corner, behind the furnace, the concrete wall looked different. Newer. She placed her hand against it. The vibration was faint but there. A low pulse, almost like a heartbeat. She stepped back. That's when she saw it. A reflection in the cracked glass of an old mirror nearby, not her own but something behind her. Motionless. Watching. Too tall for the ceiling. She turned. Nothing. The basement was empty. But the mirror was still fogged where the breath of something had once been. Agent Holloway filed one final report. It wasn't official. She sent it through a private channel to a retired FBI profiler known for his work on anomalous cases. Her closing line, "This wasn't murder. This was an offering." 2 weeks later she resigned. No public statement. Vanished from social media. Her phone went dark. Her apartment was found abandoned, door unlocked, dinner on the table. A faint smell lingered in the air. Sweet. Decaying. And on her wall, a single note taped above her desk. "They died smiling, because they saw what comes next."